Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Taanit. And today is our second lesson, and we are going to be reviewing Daf 7 through 13. Okay, and we have a bunch of pictures for everyone today. I want to say a special thank you to Style a Daf, Rabbi Natan Farber, who produces these beautiful pictures that I'm going to share with you today. Okay, let's start with Daf 7. Daf 7 tells us that rain is better than a number of things. You can see three pictures here. Daf 7 tells us that rain is better than Tchiyat HaMetim, than the resurrection of the dead, or maybe equal to it. So the Gemara says that it is greater or equal to the day that we receive the Torah. That's that second picture. Or the third option is that rain is better than the time that again, a day that it rains is better than the day that God created the heavens and the earth. And here the Gemara is talking about the greatness of rain, and I think here really I don't know how literal the Gemara is meant to be taken, but I think that many of us take rain for granted, or even, are annoyed. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's raining. It's wet. It's not fun. It's uncomfortable. I think the Gemara is trying to express to us the miraculousness, the greatness of rain, and how we shouldn't take natural occurrences for granted, rather recognize the greatness that they represent. From here, the Gemara talks about the Torah. And here I'm going to show you another picture. Again, thank you to Rabbi Natan Farber. This is a beautiful just illustration. The Gemara compares the Torah to numerous things and how it is similar to all of these things. So we'll go one at a time. So the Gemara tells us that the Torah is like fire, right? And the words, right, God's words are like fire in the sense that right, you can't light a fire on its own, right? It needs to be lit by something external. The same thing with Torah, right? Torah needs to be passed on from one person to the other, right? You need to learn from another person, and then you pass it on from teacher to student. And you need to maintain the words of the Torah, and the importance of learning Torah with other people. So first of all, thank you everyone who is learning Torah with me today. Thank you for coming out and signing in, I should say. Torah is like wood. How is Torah like wood? Right, we say very famously, Eitz Chaim Hi, right? The Torah is like a living tree. What does that mean? Why? So here the Gemara says that a splinter of wood is used to light a larger piece of wood, meaning to ignite a fire. And therefore, and this is a beautiful idea that we learn from our students, right? The small wood gives Torah, gives support to the larger pieces of wood. And therefore, it's very important for one to learn, but also to teach, and that relationship is very important. The Torah is like water. I think, right, this is also a famous one. The Torah is like water. It goes from a high spot to a lower level. Again, what's the idea? That Torah only goes to the humble person, right? We need to lower ourselves, to humble ourselves in order to receive the messages of the Torah. The Torah, the Gemara says the Torah is like water, wine, and milk. Why? Because these things, they are preserved, excuse me, they're preserved in inferior vessels, right? In clay vessels, not in a fancy vessel. So too, again, the Torah needs to be, I guess, retained by a humble vessel. Again, the humble vessel is the student. And here is, I think, a famous story of Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, who was known to be not very good looking. The Gemara says actually quite ugly. And the daughter of the Caesar asked, how could such a great rabbi be so ugly, right? How could, excuse me, how could God let his knowledge be in someone that is so ugly? Again, the the Romans put a lot of emphasis on external looks, and it's a long story, but basically he tells her, you should take all of your wine and you should put it in, gold and silver utensils. And she does, because she thinks it should be in a beautiful utensil, but everything spoils because that's not how you keep wine. And her father yells at her, and she realizes that she was tricked, and he tries to teach her that wine needs to be kept in humble or ugly utensils, and therefore there is something important to the utensil. It doesn't always have to be gold and silver and important. Also, these three liquids can get ruined very easily. So too the Torah, right? These things can get spoiled. And so too the Torah, right? We have to take care of it and make sure that it is kept safe. Rain is as great as the day that, as I mentioned, that God created the heavens and the earth. And from here, we start talking about, right, in the beginning, I talked about the very natural aspect of rain. Here, the Gemara now goes at the bottom of Daf 7 to the, I would say, the spiritual side of rain. What does that mean? The Gemara says that rain falls when God forgives us of all of our sins. And therefore, it's linked to how we are, how we behave, how we are in relationship to God. And rain is withheld if the Jews do evil things. And here again, another slide, that rains are either withheld or not withheld for different things. So here's a number of things. It says that if the Jews do evil, so then God is going to withhold the rain. If they don't give trumot and maasrot, right, the tithes that go to the priests and the Leviim, those need to be given, and if they don't, then it doesn't rain. If people speak lashon hara, if they speak evil or badly of their fellow person, then God will withhold the rain. If you are haughty, then God will not let it rain. Or if you are lazy, if you're not learning Torah, God will withhold the rain. The bottom of Daf 7 tells us that the Torah is like light. If you don't, again, if you don't learn Torah, then the rain won't come. Or because people are stealing, again, back to this idea, maybe if people steal, then it won't rain. And you have to pray for the rain to come. The Gemara on the top of Daf 8 tells us that if it's hard for you to learn, then it must be because you don't have the foundation. The foundation is learning Mishnah, and you need to learn it at least 40 times before you start learning Gemara. And that is the way to strengthen your learning, the foundation of your learning. The Gemara also says that if it's hard for you to learn, maybe it's because your teacher isn't being nice to you. So I hope I'm being nice. But the idea that a teacher needs to treat their students with respect and kindness is actually here in this daf of Gemara. If it doesn't rain, the Gemara tells us it's because people aren't praying properly, right? The importance of proper prayer. And what do? So then you go to someone who knows how to pray, and they teach you how to pray properly. if it starts to rain because you started praying, don't become haughty and say, "Oh, look how great I am! I prayed, I davened, and now it started to rain." Right? That would be very bad. And since we're talking about prayer, Daf 8 tells us about the importance of sincerity in our prayers. Right, the importance of focusing when we're praying, and if not, then it is problematic. Um, um, the Gemara tells us um, the Gemara tells us that God is exacting in this world of the righteous people. I think this is a very important concept because many times people look around. Philosophers talk about this all the time. The concept of what we call in Hebrew tzaddik viralo, right? We see that there are tzaddikim, there are righteous people, and their lives are challenging, difficult, they are suffering. And that doesn't make sense to us, right? We think that if you're doing good in this world, then your life should be good. And here the Gemara is I think the Gemara is trying to explain to us God is very exacting in his judgment of righteous people. And why does he do this? In order to save them from pain in the next world. The idea is that if you suffer in this world, if you have challenges in this world, then in the next world, it will all be good, right? You don't have to suffer at all. And therefore, the Gemara tells us that we should rejoice in the suffering that we have in this world because it will bring salvation in the next world. Back to the rain, God withholds rain like a birth can be delayed, right? We can understand that childbirth can be delayed, and therefore rain also is similarly withheld. Again, and the Gemara brings different verses to show the parallel between a child being born and rain, which goes back to what we did last week with the three keys, right? The three keys, one of which is childbirth, and the other is rain. The Gemara tells us that God makes sure that the best rain falls in the best places, right? Meaning every place gets the rain that they need. In the mountains, they get strong rain. In the fields, it's much lighter, and God makes sure that everybody gets what they need. The Gemara tells us a story that there was a time when there was a famine and a plague, and the Gemara teaches us that if, let's say, there are two things happening, or you're suffering from two things, you can only pray for salvation from one. So they didn't know which one to pray for, the end of the famine or the end of the plague. So the Gemara tells us on Daf 8 that they prayed for food because God will want them to live. And then when they get the food, so then the famine will be over, and then the plague will also be over because God will want them to be alive in order to eat the food. So they thought that they can kind of, as we would say, kill two birds with one stone. People accepted upon themselves to fast to be saved from bad decrees of the government. And they were saved before they fasted. And here again, remember we did discuss this last time, and we'll see in a minute if you continue the fast or not. The Gemara says here that it's not good if it rains on a Friday. And we all know that on Friday we get ready for Shabbat, and if it's raining, it's complicated. We have a lot of things we need to do, and we want to get ready for Shabbat, and that's challenging when it is raining. If it's sunny on Shabbat, that's very good for the poor people who need to be out to go get food. And here the Gemara talks. This is a beautiful concept of the idea that blessings only come to things that are covered from our eyes. And I think it's beautiful that today is also Thanksgiving, right? The idea of being thankful for the things that we have. So the Gemara teaches us that when do we get blessing in our lives? When we aren't constantly checking to see how much we have of things, or on things that you can't see, right? So the Gemara gives an example that you can say a prayer on your harvest, right? I really hope I have a good crop. So you can say it before you start counting how much you have. But if you're already counting how much you have, that's already too late because you're starting to measure, you're starting to see what you have. So therefore, you should pray before you start measuring it, right? So this idea of don't keep checking your bank account to see if there's more money. Give it a few days. Don't check it every day. Who knows? Maybe there will be more than you expected in that bank account. Back to rain. Rain is greater than kibbutz galuyot. Kibbutz galuyot is the ingathering of the nations, which is the beginning of the redemptive process. And the Gemara brings the parallel of when we say in Shir Hamalot before, on Shabbat, before the grace after meals, the Birkat Hamazon, it says that the redemption will be like afikei mayim. Afikei mayim are the like flash floods in the desert. So this idea that there's a similarity between the redemption and water or streams. Another reason, we were talking about reasons rain will be withheld. It says that rain will be stopped if people don't give money that they pledged, right? I remember in America growing up, they used to have appeals in the shul all the time. They ask for people to give donations. The Gemara is saying if you decide you're going to donate something, you must give that and not say, oh, I didn't mean it when I said it. Daf number 9, Daf Tet. The Gemara tells us, since we're talking about rain, there was a whole back and forth, a chavruta between a teacher and a student. And it says that if you give ma'aser, if you give charity, a tenth of your income, then you will be rich, right? The verse is aser ta'aser. The word means take a tenth of your income, of your wealth. But since it says this interesting, the way it's said is very interesting. So the Gemara says aser ta'aser, right? If you give ma'aser, right? Tit asher, you will become, or te asher, you will become rich. And this idea that if you are charitable, if you give charity, right? Some people say, oh, I don't have enough money to give charity. The Gemara says, no, it's the opposite. If you give charity, God will reward you with wealth. The Gemara says that you can actually test God in this way, right? You can see and give charity and see what happens. You might think that, wait a minute, you're not supposed to test God. The Gemara says, no. In this, you're allowed to test God with nothing else. So I guess the idea is that you can test God in something that other people will benefit from, right? You're giving charity, so it's kind of a win-win. Okay. The next idea is that God will make it rain for an individual, but for blessing, for parnasa or extra parnasa, he'll only do that for a community. And here we're gonna talk today a lot about the individual versus the community, which is an important concept in terms of who is praying and who needs things. Obviously, the idea is that there is strength in numbers, and God answers the community much more than God answers the individual, which is why, unfortunately, when things are challenging, definitely here in Israel, there's a concept of communal prayer, right? A number of years ago, when there was very little rainfall, there was communal prayer. There's actually a national prayer at the Kotel. Everybody got together, and thousands of people got together to pray, and it actually rained by the end. I heard a story this week. Someone mentioned that at that communal prayer, one person brought an umbrella because he had so much faith that it was going to rain, and by the end of the prayer, it started raining. So just shows the importance of faith. Okay, let's talk about leadership. Um, Here the Gemara says on Daf 9 that there were three great leaders in the desert, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam, and each one, in their merit, the Jews were saved or got something important that they needed in the desert, right? So because of Miriam, the Jewish people had water, right? There was a well, it's called Be'er Miriam. So that is the well of Miriam. When she died, it went away, but it says that it came back in the merit of Aaron and Moshe. Aaron, in his merit, we had the Ananei HaKavod, the divine clouds. Again, when he died, it went away, but it came back. When Moshe, because of Moshe, we had the man, the special food that fell from the sky every single day except for Shabbat. And when he died, when Moshe died, everything went away, right? The idea was then they got to Israel and then they were able to be self-sufficient. Okay. One second. Okay, God will make it. So as I mentioned before, God will make it rain for individuals. And he says very interestingly in the Gemara that even for one plant in the field, God will make it rain. And I think that this is really a beautiful idea. So I just talked about, excuse me, I just talked about the strength in numbers and the importance of community. Here, the Gemara talks about the strength of one person, the individual. Excuse me one second. Right here, the Gemara on Daf 9 tells us that even when one person needs something, God is going to listen. And don't ever think, who am I to pray to God? Here the Gemara is telling us, even one plant in the field, God will make it rain for that. Excuse me. God will make it rain for that plant. Okay. From here, the Gemara discusses where does rain come from? Again, I don't think that this is a scientific question. I don't think that they're looking for a scientific answer. I think here, I think it's really more philosophical or metaphorical, right? Where does blessing come from, right? Does it start in the on the earth and then go up to the heavens and then come down? Does it come down from the heavens? You can see here, it's a machloket because welcome to the Gemara, right? Where does the rain come from? One opinion is it comes from the ocean, and then it becomes sweetened by the clouds. Again, the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, if it comes from the ocean and we know that ocean water is salty, how could that be? And we know rain is sweet. Oh, don't worry, the clouds purify the ocean water. Or the rain actually starts from the upper waters. If you remember in creation, God separates the upper waters and the lower waters. So there is water in the heavens, and rain comes from the water in the heavens. And the clouds might come from the earth, but they're filled with water from the sky, right? Again, because they understood the concept, which is fascinating. Even at the time of the Gemara, they understood the concept of the water cycle. So it's interesting to understand that clouds are formed from the ocean, but no, they're filled with water from the sky. The Gemara says at the bottom of Daf 9 that raindrops prove the mighty power of God. How? Because each drop is separate. We know if you put drops of water together, in your cup, they mix together into one, puddle of water. But interestingly, in the clouds, right, they are separated into each individual drop. So, wow, God is so amazing that he creates, right, drops of water. Again, I think the beauty of this Gemara is teaching us, right, understand, right, things we take for granted. And it's really just a beautiful, a beautiful concept. Daf 10 talks about the greatness of Eretz Israel. Again, here I'm going to thank Daf HaChaim, who again also has great slides. So he made this beautiful slide about the importance of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. So here Daf 10 tells us about the greatness of Israel. Why? Israel was created before all the lands, and here each statement is supported by a verse. It says that God waters the land of Israel directly, but other places get the remnants of the water, or that other places are watered by a messenger as opposed to directly from God, right? Israel gets, as I said, rainwater. Other places get the leftover water. Israel gets the water first, as opposed to other places. Again, I think that here we know that everywhere else there's so much more water. So I think here the Gemara is trying to tell us we might have less water, but it's better water. So it's again, an interesting idea. The Gemara tells us that the upper waters that we discussed before hang in balance because of God, right? He is keeping that water up in the heavens, and that produces rain. And here the Gemara on Daf 10 brings a support for each one of the opinions of where the rain starts from, whether it starts from the oceans on earth or from the heavens. The Gemara tells us that all water comes actually from Gan Eden, from the Garden of Eden, because the verse says that there was a river that exited, that left the Garden of Eden out into the world. So all the world's water comes from Eden. And because we're talking about the relationship between the Garden of Eden and the rest of the world, the Gemara gives us relative sizes of things. So the Gemara tells us that Egypt is a 60th of Cush, which was a nation in Egypt, and Cush is a 60th of the entire world, and the world is a 60th of the Garden of Eden. The garden is a 60th of Eden itself, because again, it's just talking about the garden. The garden is just a small fraction of Eden itself, and Eden is a 60th of Gehenom, again, of hell. Right, we see that the world is just a tiny fraction to how large Gehenom really is. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 10 tells us that, remember we were talking about when do we start asking for rain. So here the Mishnah tells us that we ask for rain on the 3rd of Cheshvan. Again, asking is when we say 10 tal umatar, right? God, please give us rain. Or the other opinion is that we start on the 7th. Why is there a difference of opinion? The second opinion is that we want to make sure that all the pilgrims who came to Jerusalem for the festival are able to get home, and therefore we're going to wait till the 7th of Cheshvan, which is 15 days after Sukkot. The Gemara tells us that this is actually the rule, that we do wait till the 7th of Cheshvan, and that's when in Israel we start saying 10 tal umatar. That is much earlier than everybody else outside of Israel. We're going to discuss why in a minute. Here the Gemara tells, we're going to discuss it right now. The Gemara tells us that in Bavel, they actually asked for rain 60 days after the beginning of the season. And this is, again, where in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, you actually start asking for rain 10 talumatar, December 4th or 5th. That's based on this Gemara, which is 60 days after the equinox. I always thought that the equinox was September 21st, but apparently in this century there was some mix-up in the Gregorian calendar, and therefore the real equinox is actually the beginning of October, and therefore 60 days after that is December. So that's just a quick explanation on why people outside of Israel say Ten Talumatar December 4th or 5th. You might have asked, why is it an English date? Why is it not a Hebrew date? So that is interesting for you to know. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 10 tells us that on the 17th of Cheshvan, my birthday, and the day that the flood started, but so I guess it's a very important rain day. So if it didn't rain by the 17th of Cheshvan, so then selected people need to fast. We're going to see who these selected people are, and they're going to fast 3 fasts. We're going to learn that fasts come in a set of 3: Monday, Thursday, and Monday. Okay, we'll discuss why in a minute. And it continues that if on the 1st of Kislev, which is the next month, if it doesn't rain, so then the court decrees 3 fasts on everyone, right? So the first set are for the special people. The next set is for everybody. And in these fasts, they're considered minor fast in the sense that you can eat the night before and you can work and wash and anoint yourself and wear leather shoes and have sexual relations. It's not like Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. It's more of a minor fast. The Gemara asks, who are these yichidim, these special people? They are the rabbis, right? And here we see that the leaders are the ones who take responsibility for the nation. And as I said, they're going to fast Monday, Thursday, and Monday. And this is important for them to fast. Here the Gemara says that the students that are learning in the study halls, in the yeshivot, so if you are, if someone can ask you a question and you know the answer, and it could be not something that you're learning, then you're considered a rabbi as opposed to a student, and then you should fast and take responsibility, as we've mentioned before. Okay. The Gemara tells us that if you're fasting for some sort of trouble and it changes while you're fasting, you don't stop fasting. You continue the fast, right? It doesn't look good. So you have to finish that fast that you took upon yourself. If you're traveling from one place to another, and there are different customs in terms of fasting, you need to take the stringencies of each place, right? The place that you left and the place that you are coming to. And since we're talking about traveling, the Gemara says that you shouldn't learn anything too intensely while you're on the road because it can make you distracted. But you should discuss Torah when you're on the road. It can save you from any terrible things that might happen. And this is learned from Eliyahu and Elisha, the 2 prophets, that they were talking Torah while they were on the journey. Okay, the Gemara says that when you're traveling, first of all, you shouldn't take big steps. It's a sign of haughtiness. You should take regular sized steps, and you should leave and come in during the day, right? It's dangerous to travel at night, and you should eat very sparingly. Again, it's not good for your stomach when you're walking, or because you should ration your food to make sure that you have enough for your entire journey. Daf 11 tells us that you should stay with your community even if there is suffering going on in your community, and you should suffer with them and not leave them to suffer. Right? This is learned from Moshe, right? He heard that the Jewish people were suffering and he went to join them, right? As opposed to in Megillat Ruth, where they leave, right? So it's important to stay and help the community. As I mentioned before, right, righteous people are judged stringently in this world, so that in the next world they will have good in the next world. Evil people enjoy this world, so that in the next world they actually will suffer much greater, in a much greater way. People, and then the Gemara tells us that in the next world, right, when we die, people are shown all of their deeds, and you see, right, basically what could have been or where you went wrong. Um, okay. The Gemara says that, wait a minute, it seems that we're talking about fasting being a very positive thing. But then the Gemara says we know that when we talk about the Nazir, right, the Nazarite, who withholds certain things from himself, right? He takes upon himself not to drink wine. And we know that he's seen as a sinner, in the sense that at the end he brings a sin offering, a korban chatat. So it must be that it's not good to withhold things from you. So the Gemara says, no. Really, the Nazir is sanctified, is kadosh, right? And fasting really is okay, right? If you can endure it. Again, it's something temporary and something that is important. So the Gemara says that is important. Okay. It says also, interestingly, right, that somebody who's very learned maybe shouldn't fast because it distracts him from his learning. Interestingly, we saw the exact opposite before, that it was the rabbis who were responsible to fast because of their responsibility for the community. The Gemara tells us that if you accept upon yourself to fast, you can eat the night before and start the fast in the morning, and you should add the prayer of Anenu in your daily prayers. And here the Gemara starts talking about a concept called Taanit Lishaot. Is there something is there a possibility that you can fast for a few hours and not for an entire day, right? We're not used to that. We have a concept of either you fast a whole day, again, either starting in the morning or from the night before, but we really don't have a concept of fasting a few hours in the day. And here, as we always see, there's actually going to be a machloket if you can fast for a few hours or not. And that is something that is disagreed upon here on Daf 11. Daf 12 also starts with this idea of fasting for half a day. One says you have to finish it. You can't just stop in the middle. The other says, no, if you want to fast half a day, you can do that. This is, again, things that you've taken upon yourself as an individual. So the Gemara tells us that, and here the Gemara goes through on Daf 12, different situations where different individuals took upon themselves a fast day, and the case was that they fasted for a few hours. So on one hand, it's a proof that you can. On the other hand, the Gemara says that no, it's not a proof, because there were extenuating circumstances to the fast that these people were fasting. So from here, the Gemara also talks about if you need to take on a fast, you take it upon yourself the day before, right? You say by mincha the day before, you say that you're going to fast the next day. And there's a machloket if it means mincha. Again, there are two times for mincha. We learned actually in Masechet Brachot. One is mincha gdola, the big mincha, which is in the middle of the day, 12:30, right? 6.5 hours of the day, or mincha ktana, meaning 9.5 hours of the day, right? Later on in the afternoon. Here the Gemara says, when does the fast start, right? Does it start when the crow when the rooster crows in the morning, or maybe when you finish dinner, right? The night, like you eat dinner and then the fast starts. What if you sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night? Can you eat or not? Again, for all the fasts that we do, it actually starts at sunrise, and therefore, most fasts it'll say, right? The fast starts. Actually, we're going to have a fast in a few weeks, Asara B'Tevet, right? And it'll say the fast starts at 5 a.m. So if you wake up at 4 a.m., you can have a cup of coffee if you want. um, the Gemara tells us that on a personal fast, when you take it upon yourself, you can't wear leather shoes because maybe you took upon yourself a more stringent fast, unless you specify, right? If you specify, I'm taking upon myself a fast, but I want to wear leather shoes, then that would be okay. Communal fasts do have these restrictions, but we talked about when those restrictions are going to come upon you. The Gemara says that you can borrow and pay back fast days. What does that mean? Let's say you took upon yourself a fast, but then let's say you don't want to do it tomorrow. You can say, oh, I'm going to fast, but not tomorrow. I'll do it the next day, right? This is okay as long as you pay it back, as we say. There's a concept called Taanit Chalom, where you take upon yourself a fast after having a bad dream. The Gemara tells us that if you wake up having a bad dream, we actually did this in Masachet Brachot as well. First of all, you should always say, the Gemara in Brachot told us that if you wake up with a bad dream, you should also always say, that was an amazing dream, right? And figure out how, you can interpret it in whatever way you want, but interpret it in a good way, and that means it'll be good. Excuse me. But the Gemara says that it is also good to fast that day, and you cannot push it off, meaning that's the one fast that you must fast on that day, even if it's Shabbat. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 12 tells us that, again, we did the first set, which was for the special people, the second set, which was for everybody. If this passes, then 3 more fasts come on the community. Again, you can eat the night before, but now you cannot do work. You cannot bathe or wear shoes or have relations. They have to close the bathhouses so that you don't bathe. If this doesn't work, again, we're now on the second set of 3. If that doesn't work, so then they decree 7 more fast days, and that is a total of 13, right? 3, 3, and then 7. And in this set of 7, they cry out and they close the stores. They'll open it a little bit at night for you to get food, but otherwise it's closed. If those aren't answered, then they need to limit business. They limit building and planting and weddings. They limit greetings to each other. And then if that doesn't work, you go back to the special people who continue to fast private fasts till Nisan. And if it rains after Nisan, that's already a bad sign. I mean, the whole thing was a bad sign, but it's even worse if it rains after Nisan, which is in the spring. Okay, the Gemara tells us, why can't you work? So the Gemara says that actually fast days are actually like a festival, and therefore, just like you don't work in a festival, you also don't work during a fast day. The idea that you are focusing on the day at hand. Daf 13 tells us that, again, God is going to check out or scrutinize the deeds of the people, and that we should pray as much as possible on these days. And here there is a correlation between people fasting and mourning, right? People who are in mourning also don't wash with certain types of, right? Don't wash with water. We'll see what. And the Gemara tells us that for public fasts, you cannot wash with warm water, again, because it's pleasurable, but with cold water, it's okay. And that's why they closed the bathhouse. But if you need to go to the mikvah, then you can go anytime, even Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. We actually do not say that. We say that those are the 2 days of the year you actually do not go to the mikvah, but every other day of the year you can. But again, here the Gemara says maybe with cold water you can wash your body. You can, and here we're going to talk about wearing shoes. You can wear shoes on the road, right? If you're traveling and you need to wear shoes, you do not have to go barefoot. But once you get into the city, you need to take off your leather shoes. What about washing, right? Washing your full body is problematic, but washing your hands and feet is okay. Maybe this is only with cold water or maybe even with warm water. And it goes back and forth in the Gemara talking about warm versus cold water. Okay, the Gemara here talks about the difference between a girl who is 12 as opposed to a girl who is 12 and a half. A girl who's 12 is called a na'ara, right? A young maiden. A girl who is 12 and a half is called a bogeret. We would say adult. And the idea in the Gemara, in the time of the Gemara, was that a bogeret, a girl who's 12 and a half, is of marriageable age. And therefore, the Gemara says that if, unfortunately, a girl who is 12 and a half is in mourning, she is allowed to bathe herself so she looks beautiful, so that she can find a suitor. If the girl is 12, so then she does not bathe because she is not yet of marriageable age. So it's interesting. I actually had a student who asked me, is it true that, do we still think that 12 is marriageable age for girls, and that is not the case anymore. I think that, again, in those days, it was very common for girls to get married very young. Nowadays, that is not the case. So just to put that out there. Okay. The Gemara says that the halacha is that mourners cannot wash their entire body, but they can wash their hands and feet with cold water. What about prayers during the fast day? So we said that during the fast day, the prayer of Anenu is added. The question is, where is it added? One opinion is that it's added as its own blessing in the middle of Shmona Esrei, or right after Geula, after the blessing of the redemption, or it's added in Shomea Tefillah, as part of the blessing of Shomea Tefillah, right? This is actually what we do. We add Anenu in Shomea Tefillah, but when the Chazan, when the Chazan repeats the prayer, the Shmona Esrei, he actually says it in before, right after Geula. And here the Gemara tells us that when the Chazan, in the repetition of the Amida, when it's in the first set of fasts, there's only 19 blessings. He does not add another blessings. But afterwards, there are actually 24 blessings that are going to be said in the second set of fasts. We didn't learn this yet, but we will learn it next week. Or maybe you say 24 blessings even in the first set, or maybe you only say it in the last set, right? Again, we saw that there are 3 sets, 3, 3, and then 7, and there's a distinction, there's a difference. Obviously, they're getting more strict as it progresses, and we'll discuss more of this next week. So wishing everybody, first of all, thank you for your flexibility. Next week, we will go back to our regular time and day. So Be'ezrat Hashem, Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Israel time. And wishing everybody, first of all, a Shabbat Shalom, and also a Chanukah Sameach. So next week, we will, I guess, celebrate Chanukah together and learn together as well. So thank you, everyone, and wishing you a Shabbat Shalom.
So much.